My husband set his glass down and whispered that he had poisoned me. He smiled, waiting for the panic to set in. I did not scream. I simply glanced at the wall clock and began counting. Some confessions are not meant for a wife, but for a live audio backup. 30 minutes later, the unthinkable happened inside our townhouse. But it did not happen to me. My name is Madeline Hart. I am 34 years old. I was sitting at the head of a mahogany table in our townhouse in the Southridge district of Greyhaven. The view from the window was expensive. The lights of the harbor shimmered below us like scattered diamonds. Inside, the air was heavy. It felt recycled. It felt like the cabin of an airplane right before the oxygen masks drop. We were supposed to be celebrating our 3rd anniversary. The roast beef was cold on the porcelain. The red wine sat untouched in the crystal decanters. My husband, Evan Kincaid, sat opposite me. He looked impeccable in his navy blazer. He looked like the man on the cover of a business magazine, the kind who sells you a dream right before he liquidates your assets. He watched me take a sip of water. He waited until I swallowed. Then he set his own glass down on the tablecloth with precise, deliberate care. He looked me straight in the eyes. "I poisoned you," he said. He spoke the words softly. He did not shout. He did not tremble. He said it with the casual satisfaction of a man who had just checkmated an opponent after a long, tedious game. He looked at me, expecting the performance. He expected the gasp. He expected the tears. He expected the hysteria of a dying woman. I did not give him that satisfaction. My heart did not pound against my ribs. Instead, it slowed down. My brain experienced a sudden, sharp clarity. It was a sensation I knew well. It was the same cold switch that flipped when a server farm caught fire or a CEO was arrested for fraud. I am the operations director at Redwood Meridian Strategies. I do not panic. I manage crises. I assess liability. I calculate survival rates. I sat very still. I ran my tongue against the roof of my mouth. There it was. A faint, metallic tang. It tasted like copper coins or a battery terminal. It was subtle, masked by the heavy seasoning of the dinner, but it was undeniable. I did not waste time analyzing the chemical compound. That was a task for later. Right now, the objective was containment. I pushed my chair back. The legs scraped against the hardwood floor. The sound was harsh in the quiet room. "I am going to wash my hands," I said. My voice was flat. It was the voice of a woman excusing herself to powder her nose, not a woman who had just been murdered. I walked to the powder room down the hall. I stepped inside and locked the door behind me. I leaned against the heavy wood for 1 second. Just one. Then I pulled my smartphone from the pocket of my dress. The screen was already glowing. I did not need to unlock it. I did not need to search for an application. The recording app was already running. It had been running since before the appetizers arrived. A bright red bar at the top of the screen pulsed with a steady rhythm. Beneath it, the text read, "Live backup on." Every syllable Evan had just uttered was already encrypted. It was already uploading to a secure cloud server. It was already evidence. I switched to my encrypted messaging app. I selected the contact listed as Dana Rourke. I typed a single word. "Now." I hit send. I watched the small checkmark confirm delivery. Then, purely out of habit, I placed the phone face down on a plush hand towel near the sink. I gripped the edge of the marble vanity. I looked at myself in the mirror. My skin was pale. My pupils were slightly dilated, but the terror I felt was not for the toxins circulating in my blood. The terror came from the memory of Evan's face. He had looked so sure. He had looked so comfortable. He believed he had already won. He believed I was a variable he had already solved. That level of confidence was more dangerous than any chemical. I unlocked the door. I walked back into the dining room. The silence was still there, waiting for me. I sat down. I folded my hands on the table. I looked at the man who had promised to love and cherish me. Why do you want me to hear that I asked? Evan smiled. It was a smile that did not reach his eyes. He reached under the table and pulled out a thick blue folder. He slid it across the table toward me. He uncapped a fountain pen and laid it on top of the documents. To make you sign what I need, he said, his voice trailing off into a chilling whisper. Before you get weak. I glanced at the clock on the kitchen wall. The digital display flickered. It had been exactly 12 minutes since he confessed. This was not an impulse. This was not a crime of passion. This was a schedule. He was following a script. He thought he was the director of this scene. He had no idea that I had already rewritten the ending. 3 years ago, I did not see a murderer across the table. I saw a man in a tuxedo who knew exactly how to hold eye contact just long enough to make a woman feel like the only person in a crowded ballroom. We met at a charity fundraiser for ocean conservation. Evan Kincaid had a way of leaning in when he spoke, a physical intimacy that felt like a secret shared between two people. He told me he was a student of human nature. He called his ability to read people a gift. Looking back, I realize it was not a gift. It was a hunting technique. He was not reading my soul. He was scanning for vulnerabilities. I should have known better. I am the operations director at Redwood Meridian Strategies. My entire career is built on risk assessment, operational efficiency, and the brutal reality of legally binding contracts. I manage logistics for companies that cannot afford to fail. I live my life by deadlines and evidence. If a client tells me their supply chain is secure, I demand the shipping logs. Yet, when Evan told me he was a growth consultant, I did not ask to see his portfolio. Evan was always vague about his actual work. He existed in a perpetual state of almost. He had a deal that was almost signed. He had a client who was almost ready to commit. He had a wire transfer that was almost in his account. It is just a banking glitch. Babe, he would say, flashing that boyish, apologetic smile. It started with the small things. It was the classic forgotten wallet maneuver. We would be at a restaurant, the bill would arrive, and he would pat his pockets with theatrical surprise. I must have left it in my gym bag, he would say. Do you mind? Grabbing this one, I will get the next one. I never minded. I was making good money. I was proud of my independence. But he never got the next one. Or if he did, it was for coffee while I paid for the steak dinners. When I finally brought it up, months later, he turned the conversation around with the skill of a seasoned litigator. You are keeping score, he asked. Looking wounded, I thought we were partners. You are so controlling. He made me feel small for asking about my own money. He surrounded us with a choir of enablers, Carter, Jax, Sierra, and Brielle. They were his friends, a group of shiny, loud people who treated life like an all-inclusive resort. They loved to cheer for Evan's big moves, provided those moves were funded by someone else. They ordered the most expensive champagne and toasted to Evan's genius, while I quietly signed the receipt. Then there was his mother, Lorraine Kincaid. She was a woman who wore pearls and pastel cardigans like armor. She welcomed me into the family with open arms and cold eyes. She would invite me to tea, pour from a silver pot, and smile sweetly. Madeline, dear, she said once, stirring her tea without looking at me. Evan has such grand visions. Do you think you have enough substance to support a man of his stature? She made it sound like a question about my emotional capacity. I know now she was asking about my credit limit. I told them about my life with pride. I told them how I grew up in a rusted industrial town where the sky was always gray. I told them how I worked 2 jobs to pay my own tuition, how I built my career from the ground up without a safety net. I thought I was sharing my story of resilience. Evan listened intently. He nodded. He held my hand. But he was not admiring my character. He was appraising an asset. He was calculating exactly how much equity I had built in my life and how long it would take to siphon it off. I did not realize I was becoming his venture capital. He wrapped every withdrawal, every loan, And every unpaid bill in the word us. It is for our future, he would say. We are building an empire. I believed him. I thought we were building a life. I did not know I was just the investor in a Ponzi scheme named Evan Kincaid. The first sign of betrayal was not a lipstick stain on a collar or a text message from a secret lover. It was an automated email from a bank I did not use. The subject line thanked me for opening a new platinum line of credit. Most wives would have assumed it was a phishing scam and deleted it. I did not delete it. I clicked the link to the secure portal. I entered my social security number to verify the account existence. It was real. I sat at my desk in my home office. The house was quiet. Evan was at the gym, or at least that was what his calendar said. I pulled the full credit report. The account had been opened 3 days ago. The credit limit was $50,000. I dug deeper into the metadata of the application. The request originated from an IP address that perfectly matched our home Wi-Fi network. The timestamp marked the submission at 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. On that Tuesday, I was in Chicago for a client merger. I was 400 miles away from the router that sent the application. I did not scream. I did not call Evan to demand an explanation. I took a screenshot. I saved the access logs. I opened a new encrypted folder on my private server and named it simply Kincaid. I began to work backward through the timeline. Identity theft requires tools. I searched my email history for keywords like sign, contract, and urgent. I found it. 3 months ago. Evan had sent me a frantic text while I was in a meeting. He claimed the power company needed a renewed digital signature immediately, or they would cut the electricity to the townhouse. I had sent him my verified digital signature file without a second thought. I trusted him. I had handed him the digital equivalent of my thumbprint. He had not used it for the power bill. I turned my attention to our joint expenditures. I pulled the bank statements for the last year and exported them into a spreadsheet. I filtered for recurring payments to vendors I did not recognize. One name stood out: Kincaid and Lorne Advisory. It sounded legitimate. It sounded like a boutique firm. We had paid them a retainer of $3,000 a month for the last 6 months for what Evan had categorized as brand optimization. I ran the address of the firm through a satellite mapping service. I expected an office park or a downtown high-rise. The image loaded. It was a strip mall next to a dry cleaner. The specific suite number belonged to a shipping center that rented private mailboxes. I stared at the screen. I had paid $18,000 to a metal box in a strip mall. The coldness in my chest was absolute. This was not a misunderstanding. This was embezzlement. I made an appointment with Dana Rourke the next morning. Dana was not a divorce attorney who offered tissues and sympathy. She was a corporate litigator who specialized in asset recovery and fraud. She worked out of an office that smelled of espresso and old leather. She listened to my timeline without interrupting. She looked at the screenshots of the IP logs and the fake company address. She leaned forward and rested her elbows on the glass desk. "Madeline, listen to me very carefully," Dana said. "Do not confront him yet. Do not scream at him. Do not take revenge with your emotions. Take revenge with a file." I nodded. I felt like a student learning a new operating system. "He is testing the waters," Dana continued, her voice low and sharp. "He stole your digital identity. He siphoned $18,000 just to see if you would notice. Since you did not, he is going to escalate. If you confront him now, he will gaslight you. He will say you are crazy. He will record you screaming and use it to paint you as unstable. So I do nothing I asked. You do everything," Dana corrected. "But you do it in silence. No social media posts. No long angry text messages. If he baits you, you walk away. He wants a reaction. Do not give him one. We need to find out what the end game is." I left her office and drove home. The city looked different. Every storefront looked like a potential shell company. I realized then that Evan was not just stealing money. A man does not steal $50,000 of credit and $18,000 of cash just to buy watches. He was building a war chest. He was liquidating my life to fund his escape. Or worse. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw Evan's car. He was home. I checked my rearview mirror and fixed my lipstick. I practiced a smile. It was the hardest thing I had ever heard. I realized with a sick feeling that the theft was not the crime. The theft was just the preparation. He was clearing the decks for a final blow that would leave me with nothing, not even my name. The air in the townhouse grew heavy with an unspoken urgency. It was no longer just about the money disappearing from the accounts. It was about the paper trail Evan was trying to create. He stopped asking for favors and started demanding compliance, masking it as administrative boredom. One morning, while I was rushing to finish a coffee before work, Evan slid a document across the granite island. It was buried under a stack of junk mail. "Just sign this for me, babe," he said, not looking up from his phone. "It is just standard banking procedure." They updated their privacy terms again. I looked at the paper. It was a single page, but the header was folded back. I did not sign it. I pretended to spill a drop of coffee on my blouse. "I am late," I said, grabbing my bag. "Leave it on the desk. I will get to it tonight." He did not like that. I saw his jaw tighten. He wanted the signature right then, while I was distracted. Then came Lorraine. She began visiting unannounced, letting herself in with the spare key I had foolishly given her years ago. She brought herbal teas that smelled like wet earth and unsolicited advice about mortality. She sat on my sofa, smoothing her skirt, and looked at me with faux concern. "You look so tired." "Madeline," she said, tilting her head, "have you thought about updating your health directives? We never know when we might lose our capacity to decide, do we?" She used the words "lose capacity" like she was discussing the weather. It was a grooming process. She was planting the seed that I was fragile, that I was on the verge of a breakdown. The confirmation email came 2 days later. Evan had booked a comprehensive neurological checkup for me at a clinic I had never heard of, located in a rundown medical park on the edge of the city. He had listed himself as the primary contact for the results. He wanted to hold the medical records. He wanted to control the narrative of my body. I took the email to Dana. She read it and took off her glasses. "He is not just stealing," Dana said, her voice hard. "He is building a case for incapacitation. If he gets a medical power of attorney and a doctor to say you are mentally unfit, he does not need you to sign checks anymore. He can legally liquidate everything you own to pay for your care." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. They were not just planning to rob me. They were planning to erase me as a legal entity. I went into total lockdown. That night, I changed every password to a generated string of alphanumeric chaos. I set up two-factor authentication on every account, linking them to a burner phone Evan did not know existed. I installed an app that automatically recorded audio whenever Evan's number called mine. I called my bank from the car. I spoke to the fraud department and set up a hard freeze trigger. "I want a specific instruction on the file," I told the agent. "No large transfers without voice verification and a specific code word. If anyone tries to bypass this with a power of attorney document, freeze the account immediately and alert the police." At work, I pulled my colleague, Sarah, into a conference room. Sarah was the kind of person who kept a log of her coffee intake. I trusted her precision. "I need you to verify my location for the past 3 months against my work calendar," I said. "And I need you to sign a witness statement for every date I was out of town." Sarah did not ask why. She saw the look in my eyes and opened her laptop. I went home to a performance. Evan was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables. He had music playing. He poured a glass of wine and set it down in front of me. He kissed my forehead. "Rough day," he asked. "Drink this. It will help you. Relax." He watched me picking up the glass. He was smiling, but his eyes were not. They were calculating. He was waiting to see if I would drink it without question. He was testing the animal to see if it was still docile. I lifted the glass. I took a sip. It was just wine, but I knew the real poison was not in the glass yet. It was in the pen he wanted me to hold and the papers he wanted me to sign. "It is delicious," I said. I decided then, if he wanted a tragedy, I would give him one. If he wanted a helpless wife, I would play the part. I would let him set the stage. I would let him think he was the director, but when the curtain finally fell, he would realize too late that I had written the script. I treated the planning of our anniversary dinner not as a romantic gesture, but as a boardroom execution. Every detail was a calculated logistical move. I invited Sarah, my most observant colleague from Redwood Meridian, because she notices when a spreadsheet cell is off by a single decimal point. She would notice if I was slurring my words or acting out of character. I also invited Jax and Brielle, Evan's friends. I needed them there. I needed his own choir to witness his solo performance when it finally went off key. They thought they were coming for champagne and expensive roast beef. They were actually coming to serve as living affidavits in a future court filing. Dana had the paperwork ready on her desk across town. It was a stack of legal dynamite and emergency protection order, drafted and stamped, lacking only a timestamp and a specific incident to make it enforceable. We called this the trigger event. I just need one clear act. Dana had told me during our final briefing. A threat, a confession, a physical move. Give me that, and I will rain hell on him. I had hired a private investigator named Cole to watch the other side of Evan's life. Cole confirmed what the bank statements had only hinted at. Evan was not just bad with money, he was drowning. Cole sent me photos of Evan meeting with a man in the back of a pool hall in East Greyhaven. This was not a bank loan officer. This was the kind of lender who calculated interest in broken bones. Evan was desperate, and desperate men make sloppy mistakes. I just had to be there to catch the debris when he exploded. I configured my smartwatch with a panic protocol. It was a simple app script I had written myself. A single long press on the side button would bypass the lock screen, send my real-time GPS coordinates to Dana, and simultaneously begin streaming audio to a secure server. I practiced it while driving home. Press. Hold. Confirm. It was seamless. Then came the visual evidence. I bought a new smart home hub for the kitchen counter. It looked like a sleek charcoal speaker designed for streaming jazz playlists. Evan even complimented the aesthetic when he saw it. He did not know the mesh grille concealed a wide-angle lens with 4K resolution and night vision. I positioned it to capture the entire dining area and the kitchen island. The stage was set. The lighting was adjusted. I spent the afternoon organizing the physical evidence. I printed the login logs that showed him accessing my accounts. I printed the invoices from the fake shell company in the strip mall. I printed the emails where he impersonated me to the utility companies. I laid them out on the floor of my office like a tarot spread of betrayal. I compiled them into a single, bound document. I called it the incapacity packet, stealing his own terminology. I called the bank one last time to test the firewall. I want to reiterate the protocol. I told the manager, if anyone, including my husband, tries to change the power of attorney status on this account, you call me. If I do not answer with the code word, you lock the account down. Do you understand? We have flagged the account. Mrs. Kincaid, the manager assured me, nothing moves without your voice. I stood in the center of the living room and surveyed my work. I felt a strange sense of calm. The grief was gone. The anger was packed away in a box labeled for later. I was operating on pure adrenaline and strategy now. I looked at the man I had married as he walked through the door, humming a tune, carrying a bottle of wine that he likely bought with my money. He was no longer my husband. He was a liability. He was a breach of contract that needed to be terminated with extreme prejudice. That night, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I was already in bed, feigning sleep. It was a text from Evan, sent from the living room downstairs. Tomorrow will change everything. I stared at the glowing screen in the dark. I did not reply. I closed my eyes and thought about the recording devices, the lawyers, and the police on speed dial. You are right, I thought, but not for me. Back at the table, the air had turned solid. The silence was not the comfortable pause of a dinner party. It was the terrified silence of people witnessing a car crash in slow motion. Sarah, Jax, and Brielle were staring at Evan with their mouths slightly open. They had heard him whisper the words about the poison, but their brains were struggling to process the shift from host to executioner. Evan did not look at them. His focus was entirely on me. He slid the stack of papers closer to my hand. The blue folder was open now, revealing the signature lines flagged with little yellow sticky notes. "Sign it," he said. His voice was no longer a whisper. It was a flat command. I looked at the documents. It was a durable power of attorney, effective immediately upon signature. "You want me to sign this when I am not exactly—" "Lucid?" I asked, keeping my voice level. Evan sighed, a sound of exaggerated patience. "It is just for safety. Madeline, just in case you get worse. We need to make sure the assets are protected if you have an episode." Right on cue. His phone lit up on the table. It was a FaceTime request from Lorraine. The timing was so precise it felt like a theatrical cue. Evan swiped the screen to answer. Lorraine's face filled the display. She was wearing a silk robe and sitting in her living room, looking eagerly into the camera. "Evan," she asked, her voice tinny through the phone speakers. Then she squinted, trying to see past him. "Is she there, Madeline? Dear, do you feel—" "Dizzy, yet." The room went dead silent. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed to stop. I reached out and tapped the speaker icon, maximizing the volume. I looked directly into the camera lens of the phone. "Why would I feel dizzy?" "Lorraine," I asked clearly. "Unless you knew something was going to happen to me tonight." Lorraine's eyes widened. She stammered. I just meant, with the wine. You know how you get—" Evan slammed his hand down on the table, making the silverware jump. The charm was gone. The loving husband mask had dissolved, revealing the cornered, greedy child underneath. "Stop it," he snapped at me. He turned to our guests, pointing a shaking finger in my direction. "You see this. This is what I deal with. She is always controlling everything. She is paranoid. She is trying to make me look bad because she knows she is unstable." He was pivoting to the narrative he had practiced, the hysterical wife, the long-suffering husband. I stood up. My legs felt steady. I walked past him to the kitchen sink. I could feel his eyes boring into my back. I turned on the tap, filled a glass with water, and drank it slowly. I took a deep breath. Then I turned around and leaned against the counter. "Evan," I said. My voice was cool, cutting through his frantic energy like a scalpel. "You just confessed to poisoning me. You did it in front of 3 witnesses. You did it while demanding access to my financial estate." Evan let out a short, sharp laugh. It sounded brittle. "Who believes you?" he scoffed. He looked at Jax and Brielle, his usual cheerleaders. "Tell her, Jax. Tell her she is being crazy." Jax did not speak. He was pushing his chair back, scraping it against the floor as he physically distanced himself from the table. Brielle was looking at her phone, her thumb hovering over the screen, her face pale. They were shallow people, but they were not accomplices to murder. They knew what they had heard. Evan's smile faltered. He looked around the room, realizing for the first time that the audience was not clapping. I looked down at my wrist. The digital dial on my watch showed exactly 30 minutes had passed since he set his glass down. I placed my finger on the side button. I did not scream. I did not cry. I simply pressed it once, firmly, like I was selecting a floor in an elevator. I looked at Evan. "It is over." The doorbell rang. It was not a polite ring. It was a heavy, authoritative pounding that rattled the frame. Evan froze. He looked at the door, then back at me. His eyes went wide with a sudden, dawning horror. The unthinkable was happening. He thought the end of the night would be my body on a stretcher. He was about to find out that the only thing leaving this house in restraints would be his future. The front door swung open. It was not a social call. 2 uniformed police officers stood on the porch, flanked by a paramedic with a bright orange bag. The flashing blue lights from the cruiser bounced off the hallway mirrors. turning our tasteful foyer into a crime scene. Evan's face drained of color. For a split second, I saw the terror of a trapped animal. Then, he blinked, and the mask slammed back into place. He rushed forward, hands raised in a gesture of helpless concern. "Officer, thank God you are here," Evan said, his voice trembling with a perfect manufactured pitch of distress. "My wife is... She is having a severe mental health crisis. She is hallucinating." I was just trying to keep her calm. He was good. He was so good that for a moment. The younger officer looked past him at me with pity. Evan pointed at me, shaking his head. "She thinks I am trying to hurt her," Evan whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "She is paranoid." I did not argue. I did not raise my voice. I simply unlocked my phone and held it up to the senior officer. I pressed play. The audio was crystal clear, amplified by the silence of the room. "I poisoned you." Evan's voice from the recording filled the space, arrogant and calm. "To make you sign what I need, before you get... weak." The recording stopped. The senior officer looked at Evan. The pity was gone. "That is a deep fake," Evan shouted, his composure cracking. "She edited that. She is tech-savvy. She faked it." The paramedic stepped toward me. "Ma'am, do you need medical assistance? Are you experiencing symptoms?" I looked him in the eye. "I am fine. My vitals are stable." "I am stable enough to make a statement and to work with the law." The senior officer stepped between Evan and me. "Sir, I need you to step back, and I need you to hand over your phone. Now." Evan clutched his phone to his chest. "My phone. Why do you need my phone?" "This is harassment. I am the victim here." His reaction was visceral. It was not the indignation of an innocent man. It was the panic of a man holding the smoking gun. Just then, my own phone rang. It was a distinctive ringtone I had set only for one contact at the fraud department of my bank. I answered it on speakerphone. "Mrs. Kincaid?" The automated voice was replaced by a live agent, urgent and loud. "We just received a request for an immediate wire transfer of $200,000 from your primary savings. The request originated from a device labeled Evan's iPhone using your credentials. As per your instruction, we have declined the transaction and initiated a total asset freeze." The words hung in the air. Evan's face went gray. The transfer he had queued up, the one he thought would go through while I was incapacitated or dead, had just bounced. From the dining table, a shrill voice pierced the tension. We had forgotten Lorraine was still on FaceTime. "No!" Lorraine screamed from the iPad screen. "Impossible." "That time..." "It should have run by now. You said it was scheduled." It was a slip of the tongue, a frantic admission from a co-conspirator who thought she was watching a payday, not an arrest. The officer moved fast. "Sir, turn around. Hands behind your back." "You cannot do this," Evan stammered, backing away. It is a misunderstanding. I was just moving funds for safekeeping." The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound I had ever done. It was the sound of a contract breaking. It was the sound of my life breaking into two parts before the betrayal and after the justice. Evan was led out the door, still sputtering excuses, looking back at me with eyes full of hate and confusion. He could not understand how his victim had become his executioner. I stood in the hallway. My hands were trembling slightly, a physiological reaction to the adrenaline leaving my system. But my feet were planted firmly on the floor. I watched the lights of the police car spin against the walls. I was not a widow. I was not a patient. I was the plaintiff. Evan posted bail before the ink on the arrest report was dry. His lawyer, a slick operator named Sterling, spun the narrative immediately. By noon the next day, Evan was on social media. He did not look like a criminal. He looked like a heartbroken husband dealing with a wife in the throes of a breakdown. He wrote long, emotional posts about my paranoia and my stress-induced hallucinations. He tagged Redwood Meridian strategies in every post. He was not just defending himself. He was trying to torch my professional credibility. If I was crazy, I could not be trusted with billion-dollar risk assessments. I did not reply. I did not post a rebuttal. I sat in Dana's office and we drafted a formal legal notice to my company's human resources and legal departments. It stated that any communication from Evan Kincaid regarding my employment was harassment and grounds for a restraining order violation suit. Then the real clock started ticking. Cole, my private investigator, called me with a voice that sounded like gravel. "He is on a timer. Madeline," Cole said. "The people he owes. They are not banks. He owes 6 figures to a syndicate out of the chaotic Port District. He has exactly 72 hours to pay, or they stop asking nicely." That explained the desperation. It explained the clumsiness. I logged into my company's equity portal. There was a pending request. A document labeled Emergency Asset Liquidation had been uploaded 2 hours before the police arrived at my house. It authorized the immediate sale of my vested stock options. The signature at the bottom looked exactly like mine. It was a digital forgery, likely traced from the utility contract I had sent him months ago. But the rabbit hole went deeper. I started looking at where the money was supposed to go. It was not routing to Evan's personal account. It was routing to a generic limited liability company. I ran the company name through the state registry. The managing member was Lorraine Kincaid. The room seemed to tilt. Lorraine was not just a meddling mother-in-law who judged my housekeeping. She was the operator of a vulture fund. She bought bad debt and liquidated the assets of the desperate. She was not protecting her son. She was calling in his loan. She was the one squeezing him, and I was just to the collateral damage he intended to sell to pay her off. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. The poison, the confession, the glass of wine. It was never about murder. I told Dana, staring at the wall, it was about capacity. Dana nodded slowly. "If you were dead, there would be an autopsy. There would be questions. But if you were mentally compromised, if you were hospitalized for a psychotic break or chemical imbalance, then the power of attorney kicks in. He signs the papers. He sells your stock. He pays off his mother. And you wake up in a facility with nothing. He needs me to break," I said. "Exactly," Dana warned. "He is going to try to trigger you. He needs a recording of you screaming. He needs proof that you are unstable to validate the narrative he is planting online. Do not give him a single pixel of emotion." I tightened my perimeter. I stopped driving my usual route to work. I asked Sarah to shadow me to every client meeting. I was never alone. I was never unobserved. I treated my life like a secure facility. Evan was trying to play a game of domestic tragedy. He wanted a crying wife and a concerned husband. I decided to change the genre. I was not going to play house with him anymore. I was going to drag this out of the shadows of our marriage and into the harsh, fluorescent light of the judicial system. I was going to put his debts, his mother's fund, and his forgery into the public record. I looked at the calendar. 72 hours. He was running out of time, and a desperate man is a dangerous man. But he forgot that I manage risk for a living. I do not run from danger. I document it. The emergency hearing was held in a small, windowless courtroom that smelled of floor wax and stale anxiety. Evan had dressed for the role of the grieving martyr. He wore a soft gray sweater that was slightly too big for him, making him look smaller, harmless. His eyes were red-rimmed. He sat with his shoulders hunched, clutching a tissue, projecting the image of a husband terrified for his wife's sanity. My lawyer, Dana, did not bring tissues. She brought a banker's box. She did not open with an impassioned speech about betrayal. She simply placed a 3-inch thick binder on the judge's bench. It landed with a heavy thud that echoed in the silence. "Your Honor," Dana said, her voice devoid of theatrics. "We are not here to discuss feelings. We are here to discuss metadata." She walked the court through the timeline. It was surgical. She projected a slide showing the digital signature log on the contested transfer document. This signature was authorized at 2:15 in the afternoon on the 12th, Dana stated. At that exact moment, Mrs. Kincaid was presenting a quarterly risk assessment to a client in Chicago. We have a sworn affidavit from her colleague, Sarah, and the building security logs from the client's office confirming her physical presence 400 miles away. Evan shifted in his seat. He whispered something to his lawyer, Sterling. Sterling looked at the documents and frowned. Dana moved to the next exhibit. This is the device log from the bank's security server. The request to liquidate Mrs. Kincaid's assets was initiated 30 minutes after dinner began. It originated from a device named Evan's iPhone connected to the Kincaid home Wi-Fi. The judge looked over his glasses at Evan. Mr. Kincaid, do you deny owning this device? Evan stood up, his voice trembling. Your Honor, I was only trying to protect her assets. I knew she was having a breakdown. I wanted to move the funds to a secure location before she did something reckless. Dana did not look up from her notes. Mr. Kincaid, if this was a spontaneous reaction to a medical crisis, why was the durable power of attorney document drafted and printed 3 days prior to the dinner? And why was your mother, Lorraine Kincaid, dialed into a video call exactly 2 minutes before you asked my client to sign it? Evan opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked like a fish on a hook. I just wanted my mother's advice, he stammered. We are a close family. Is that so? Dana turned to the gallery where Lorraine sat. She was dressed in a beige suit, clutching a designer handbag, trying to look like a pillar of the community. Mrs. Kincaid, you are listed as the managing partner of LK Holdings, the entity designated to receive the liquidated funds. Is it true that LK Holdings specializes in purchasing distressed debt? Lorraine stiffened. I invest in various opportunities. I was trying to help my children manage their portfolio. By purchasing your daughter-in-law's stock options at 40% of their market value? Dana asked sharply. Lorraine did not answer. She looked down at her hands. The facade of the benevolent matriarch cracked, revealing the loan shark underneath. The judge had heard enough. He granted the temporary protection order immediately. He also ordered a forensic hold on all joint accounts and referred the signature forgery evidence to the district attorney's office for a criminal fraud investigation. As the bailiff ushered us out, Evan's lawyer caught up to us in the hallway. He looked tired. Ms. Rourke, Sterling said to Dana, keeping his voice low. My client is willing to discuss a settlement. We can drop the counterclaims regarding your client's mental health. We can walk away quietly, but we need a non-disclosure agreement signed today to protect everyone's reputation. I stepped forward before Dana could answer. I looked straight at Evan, who was standing 10 feet away, refusing to meet my eyes. There is no non-disclosure agreement for crimes, I said. I am not settling. I am pressing charges. Sterling sighed and walked back to Evan. I watched them argue in hushed tones. I felt a surge of triumph. I had won the battle. Then Dana stopped. She was looking at her phone. A notification had just come through from her paralegal. Her face, usually unreadable, went pale. What is it? I asked. Dana looked at me, and for the first time, I saw genuine alarm in her eyes. She handed me a printed document that her assistant had just run down the hall to deliver. We missed something, Dana said softly. It wasn't just the stock options. I looked at the paper. It was a loan agreement, a massive high-interest loan taken out 6 months ago. It was not in Evan's name. It was in mine. And the collateral listed was not the house or the car. It was an assignment of all my future earnings and bonuses from Redwood Meridian for the next 10 years. I stood in the courthouse hallway, the victory draining out of me. I realized then that Evan had not just tried to steal my past savings. He had mortgaged my future. We did not flinch at the sight of the loan agreement. Dana simply pulled up the calendar on her tablet and connected it to the courtroom display. The document was dated October 15th. The signature looked like a perfect copy of my own. On October 15th, Dana said, her voice echoing in the small room. Mrs. Kincaid was the keynote speaker at the Global Risk Summit in Seattle. The session was live-streamed. Here is the footage of her on stage at the exact minute this document was allegedly signed in Greyhaven. On the screen, a video played of me pointing to a graph, alive and very much not signing away my future earnings to a predatory lender. The timestamp was irrefutable. The signature was a digital forgery. Then Dana dropped the final hammer. She opened the metadata of the files recovered from Evan's seized laptop. The poisoning plot, Dana addressed the judge, was never intended to result in a funeral. It was a staged medical event. Mr. Kincaid needed a documented medical emergency to activate the incapacity clause in the power of attorney he tried to force my client to sign. She pointed to the screen. The file name of the document Evan had prepared was not subtle. It read, Maddie Incapacity, Packet Final. Evan slumped in his chair. The narrative of the loving husband had disintegrated. He was just a con artist who had overplayed his hand. Lorraine tried to distance herself, shifting away from her son on the bench. But Dana was relentless. She displayed a flowchart of the money trail. Every time Mr. Kincaid withdrew funds from the joint account for consulting fees, Dana explained, tracing the line with her laser pointer, an identical amount was deposited into a personal account held by Lorraine Kincaid within 24 hours. This was not business. This was laundering. Lorraine covered her face with her hands. The room fell silent. The judge looked at them with undisguised disgust. He ordered an immediate criminal investigation into fraud, forgery, and coercion. Evan was stripped of all access to our assets and placed under strict electronic monitoring pending trial. As the hearing adjourned, Evan tried one last desperate lunge. He leaned toward me, his face twisted with malice. "You think you won," he hissed, his voice shaking. "I will ruin you. I will tell everyone at Redwood Meridian that you are unstable. I will destroy your reputation." I stopped. I looked at him, not with fear, but with the indifference one feels for a stranger. "Evan," I said calmly, "you do not have a story. You only have evidence against yourself." I walked away. Outside the courtroom, a man in a sharp suit was waiting. He was the CEO of Omnicorp, one of Redwood Meridian's largest prospective clients. He had been briefed on the situation by my firm because of the high-level security clearance required for his project. "Mrs. Kincaid," he said, extending a hand. "I watched how you handled the data breach and the internal threat. That is exactly the kind of crisis management we need. We want you to lead the national security project." I shook his hand. It was the ultimate vindication. Evan thought he was breaking me. Instead, he had given me the perfect case study for my own resilience. I sat down on a bench and signed the final document of the day. It was not the power of attorney Evan had shoved at me. It was a civil lawsuit demanding full restitution and an immediate freeze on all properties owned by Lorraine Kincaid. My phone buzzed. It was an email from my doctor. The full toxicology and psychiatric evaluation results were attached. I was clean. I was sane. I was fully capable. The entire house of cards Evan had built on the lie of my instability had collapsed. I walked out of the courthouse into the bright afternoon sun. My phone buzzed again. A subject line flashed across the screen. Contract approved. I took a deep breath of fresh air. It tasted sweet. I realized then that the only poison in my life had not been in the wine glass. It had been the man I shared my bed with. And in the end, I did not need a doctor to save me. I had cured myself with the truth. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please comment your location below and let's share our thoughts. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button so this story can reach even more people.